The boomers. The boomers are homeless. The boomers are responsible for what they did to themselves. The boomers deserve it. There's a lot of things going on online now about the boomers. And let me tell you what, I really I'm not the biggest fan of the boomers. And statistically, this is published in old magazines before internet stuff was so popular. Social media was so popular that statistically, a lot of Generation Xers just in general don't like boomers. And, has a lot to do probably with kind of like they're the next ones up the ladder from us. A lot of them were our bosses. I can remember checking a guy in, and as I was going to put the paper away, I was just kind of stopping for a second or two to talk about the horrible tragedy that happened with the space shuttle and how the space shuttle blew up. And then my boss came in and found me talking to him for about 30 seconds or so. Maybe it was longer. I don't know. But he screamed at the top of his lungs, telling me to work. And then, the second occasion I was out front. Usually I have to mop the concrete, and I was out front. And I was asking the pressure washer. I was telling him how I think I mopped a day earlier, and he came in the next day. And I didn't know, and he had a Harley on the back of his setup because he drive around doing pressure washing and then rode his motorcycle. I was just asking about his Dyna, and the boomer boss came out and said said yak yak yak, Jesus yak, something like that, like I'm yakking, and I've been dealing with boomers for my whole career pretty much. My second job was Generation X. Our manager was we're Xers. They're about my age, but all through the rest of my career, it's all boomers. All the bosses were boomers. Most of the managers are boomers. And I just remember that day. I was just like saying, I said something like, can you imagine the velocity of that? When there's a hole in the craft and it's going that fast, the results must be just completely catastrophic and just unfathomable. And he just heard me talking to one of the vendors about this and just screaming, telling me to work. And I mean, I think that Generation X has more cause to hate the boomers than the millennials or Gen Z does. And the reason why I'm kind of coming out here is I'm trying to say that I don't think a lot of the boomers are really, it's not totally their fault why they would be homeless. Not all the time. I mean, they have an image of having massive muscle car collections and massive houses, and I understand a lot of this stuff was probably financed through equity through their homes in often cases. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of issues. But another thing we have to realize is 2008 was kind of a topsy-turvy time for the stock market. It was pretty wild. I used to get up every morning. And in 2008, I was not a investor, finance-minded person. I was all about precious metals, lead, gold, and silver. And I was loaded for bear. My bedroom looked like a grocery store. I had canned goods stacked against the walls. I was ready for the collapse. That's what I was ready for. I didn't have any money in any stocks, and actually, I didn't get into stocks till I actually bought my first cryptocurrency about 4 or 5 years ago, and that was XRP. Believe it or not, it wasn't even Bitcoin. And I was getting into that, and then I started to learn about what a Roth IRA was, and then I started to contribute to the Roth IRA, and that's more how I got into stocks. But come to think of it, before that, I did own some stock in a company I worked for, and I actually have the certificate still with the little flower scrolling across it and everything. And a lot of times it took a lot of money to get into the stock market. I remember a friend of mine, he had a family brokerage that he would go to, and this is before 2008 came along. I still the only thing I understood was gold and silver. And before 2008 came along, I was discussing going to that. And I'm always reminding myself that, yeah, I probably could have put a little more effort into that. I probably could have gone to like AG Edwards. I had signed up for a Scottrade account, but something went wrong in sending the information, and Scottrade called me to finish the app up. And I probably could have got into Scottrade and started buying back then too, and I probably could have took a lot of it a lot more seriously. But a lot of these funds and these stocks and things are hard to get into. And I remember that one family brokerage my friend had. I think it was like I want to say it was like a $10,000 minimum to get in. $10,000 back around 2004 was a lot more money than it is now, and it's it took a long time to earn that money. And to be honest, I mean, could I have really become very disciplined and earned the money and done this? No, I had a car payment, I had a motorcycle payment. I was taking trips up to the hills and having fun every weekend. And I wasn't spending a whole lot of money. But $10K, even for me now, is a huge chunk to sink into something. I remember I had to kind of hustle up a bit to get into Vanguard's VTSAX, Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund. And then when I had actually decided to go put a little bit into Vanguard Pacific Index Fund, VP80X, I had actually sold off 3,000 of the Vanguard VTSAX to go to the VP80X, because the VP80X also had a $3,000 to get into that index fund. And the first ETF, now this is kind of where I'm going with this. With the boomers, the brokerages, okay, to get into a brokerage costed more on average usually. But the first ETF, if I remember correctly, was Sector Spider from State Street. And I think, if I remember right, it was 1995 was the first ETF to come into. Get over here, stop that. The first ETF was in 1995. So these millennials that are out saying, well, I like the QQQ and I like the Vanguard technology, and I like all these different ETFs. ETFs didn't come along till 1995. Okay, we had very limited information in the way of these financial products, and a lot of the brokerages. I mean, brokerages. If I was in the best interest of a brokerage, would I be steering somebody out of my ecosystem? Once again, I didn't understand how a lot of that worked, but would I be steering people out of my ecosystem, or would I be wanting to keep them into my office? So I don't know. It was a little bit odd. It was a little odd. And back then, all I understood was gold and silver. And a lot of that didn't change until after 2008. And I remember finding video where Warren Buffett had approached Hank Paulson about the government doing something with having to do with stocks to help bring the economy around and kind of help out the economy. And I remember also seeing when they asked Warren Buffett how the newest generation is going to do it, he thought the next generation was going to do greater than any of the generations before. And one of the things that he suggested was a little bit of gold to fight against inflation. Now, I never hear him talk about gold. And Charlie Munger said civilized people don't buy gold. I remember him saying that. But in the boomers' defense, and as far as making bad decisions, the boomers, a lot of times, it was kind of hard for them, I think, to get into some of these stock market type funds and invest. It's not as easy as it is now. Now, I remember I started my first Roth IRA on my cell phone. And back then, they would have to go into the office and talk to the broker and tell them about what they wanted. And there were options, but it took a bit of sacrifice to do it. It did take a bit of sacrifice. And so when I see a homeless 60-year-old man, I'm not sitting there going, all right, good, he's getting his finally. Yeah, how do you like retirement now, Grandpa? I mean, I'm not really saying that. It's not, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily all their issues. And a lot of them were bailing the kids out. A lot of the millennials were hooked on heroin. A lot of times the boomer grandparents would help pieces and help them try to get through it. Or a lot of times when the Generation X children lost the house, the boomers were bailing them out because Princess couldn't move into an apartment for a couple years. They had to have a house. So a lot of times the parents sometimes would just go out and buy another house. And unfortunately, it wasn't as nice and grandiose as the Olive Garden-esque interior of the McMansion architecture, but at least Princess didn't have to move into an apartment, and that costed the boomers a lot of money too. And that's all money that I don't see them ever getting back. And do you really think those kids are going to take care of them if they're it's like, okay, Dad, you bailed me out in 2008. We're going to give you the hobby room. Do you think that's really going to happen? Or do you think that Dad's going to be living in a crossover in a parking lot? I mean, come on, okay? And that's a slippery slope too, because a lot of times the boomers have to, they got to maintain their tags. They want to live in a car or truck, they got to maintain their tags. I'm not really into this whole, hang 'em high mentality with the boomers. It's actually quite unfortunate. And I know when we see them, a lot of us think it's excess and it's bringing in other people to take our jobs and about taking our opportunities away, and we have to help the rest of the world, but we can't help our own children. I know there's that mentality too. It's a very fragmented way of thinking. It's like an underlying way of thinking. There's certain things they all do, but then there's other underlying ways of thinking inside of there. Interesting how they'll go into debt to bail out the kids during the housing crisis, but then not want the kids necessarily to be able to get a leg up. They kind of like giving jobs to people from other countries and buying everything from China. So I don't know. It's very complicated, but I don't think I think I'm going to be the bigger man on this one and not rally when I see an old 70-year-old, digging out of a trash can. And there's not a lot of boomers that were necessarily successful out the gate. There's a lot that were very unfortunate. There's a lot that just could never get a break, or they can never give anyone could never give them an opportunity. They always pick somebody else over them. And back in the 80s, there's a lot of homeless veterans, homeless Vietnam vets that they were known to hang out in the parks and drink wine and smoke pot. They were just kind of these dysfunctional winos, and they kind of wound up being homeless for a long time too, in and out of halfway houses and stuff. So I don't know. It's very difficult to paint any culture with a broad brush. I remember my trespasses and run-ins with them. I remember why I don't necessarily like them, but I don't know if it's necessarily enough to just outright wish this ill will on them. Like, yeah, I want to see them. I want to see them fail. I used to kind of have that mentality back when I was into the prepping. I kind of thought, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And all these people are going to get theirs, and I'm not really like that anymore, because now I have my options. I see my options. I have things I can control. I remember when I went to Omaha, my uncle and I was driving home. I said, I can't control certain things. I can't control when someone decides not to give me a chance or give me a job. I can't control when a person doesn't want to give me a break, but I can control what I buy. I can't control the stock market. I can't control if it crashes or if it doesn't crash, but I can control where I put my money. I can control what businesses I choose to own. There's certain things I can control. And those are one of those things that are under my control. And I do think that through my efforts, I'm going to probably turn out okay at the end. And I'm not going to put all my bag money into the Social Security. I'm also not going to trust the pension. I looked into my pension. I was really surprised how little I can get. I was asking the person on the phone, "Do you really think am I really getting that? Is that what I'm going to get if I stick around full time till all the way to retirement?" I was very surprised how little it is. And maybe the way that I get them back is by leaving jobs and not paying into that pension. And I'm now I'm not paying into it. I'm not paying into the coffers. I'm going my own way. I'm going to take care of my own retirement. And now I'm going to control what goes into my retirement and what I do. And so far, it's been okay. I haven't had to write myself any distress letters. So I'm very happy with that. I'm very happy with that. I'm actually happy not contributing to the pension anymore. That's working very well for me. But this whole the boomers deserve it. I don't know. Maybe some of them do, but I don't know. Is this a very is this a little too harsh? The rule of threes. Remember, I learned when I was a prepper the rule of threes. So what was it now? If I remember correctly, 3 hours without shelter. Is that how it goes? I mean, without shelter, that's a pretty. I mean, these survivalists can cut down some wood and make a lean-to. People have been living in huts. What people did when they got in is they lay down some sort of shelter. they had a tent or some sort of primitive shelter that would block the wind from blowing through them and freezing them to death. So I don't know. It's I don't know. To be homeless, it's I don't know. Maybe that's a little too stiff of a penalty.